My name is Georgia, and I'm 53 years old. 2 years ago, I lost my husband Robert to cancer, and since then, I've been living quietly, working part-time at our local bookstore. When my daughter Emily got married last spring, I watched her new in-laws treat me like I was some kind of charity case. They had no idea that Robert left me a $50 million estate that was still being processed through probate court. I chose to stay silent about my wealth, thinking it would reveal their true character. What happened at that wedding taught everyone present a lesson they'll never forget. Before I share what happened that day, let me know where you're watching from, and please hit that like button. You won't believe how this wedding day changed everything for my family. After Robert passed away, I made a conscious decision to keep a low profile while the legal paperwork sorted itself out. His estate was complex, involving multiple properties across 3 states, and the probate process was taking longer than expected. Rather than flaunt money I couldn't officially access, yet I chose to live modestly on my savings and part-time income from Henderson's Books downtown. My daughter Emily, 26 years old and teaching 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary, had been dating Marcus for 3 years when he proposed. Marcus seemed like a wonderful young man, kind and attentive to Emily, with a successful career in finance. What concerned me wasn't Marcus himself, but his family background. The Worthington name carried weight in our city old money that stretched back 4 generations. I first met Marcus's parents, Patricia and William Worthington, at the engagement party last fall. Patricia arrived wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her silver hair perfectly styled, every piece of jewelry carefully chosen to display wealth without appearing vulgar. William carried himself with the quiet confidence that comes from never having worried about money. From our very first conversation, I sensed Patricia's assessment of me. She looked at my simple black dress from Macy's, my modest jewelry, and my calloused hands from years of working in Robert's hardware store before his illness. When I mentioned working at the bookstore, her smile became strained. "How quaint," Patricia had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It must be nice to have such a simple life." Marcus also had a younger sister, Diana, 28 years old, and working in public relations for their family's real estate business. Diana was beautiful in that polished way money can buy, but her personality left much to be desired. She barely acknowledged my presence during the engagement party, speaking past me rather than to me whenever forced interaction occurred. Emily seemed oblivious to the subtle slights her future in-laws delivered. She was so happy about the engagement, so excited about joining what she saw as a loving, successful family. I decided to observe quietly rather than voice my concerns. After all, she was marrying Marcus, not his family. What Emily didn't know was the full extent of what Robert had left behind. She knew there were some properties and that things were being handled by lawyers, but I had deliberately kept the details vague. Robert owned a Manhattan penthouse worth $12 million, a Hampton estate valued at $15 million, a California vineyard worth $8 million, plus various commercial properties throughout the Northeast. The total estate value approached $50 million. My decision to stay quiet about this wealth wasn't about modesty or humility. It was about testing character. I wanted to see how Marcus's family would treat someone they perceived as beneath their social station. Unfortunately, they were failing that test spectacularly. During the engagement party, I overheard Patricia speaking to her sister Margaret about Emily's unfortunate background and how lucky she was to catch Marcus. William made comments about Marcus lifting Emily up from her circumstances. Diana openly discussed my obvious financial struggles within earshot, as if I were invisible. That night, driving home in my modest Honda Civic, I made a decision. I would continue playing the role of the struggling widow. I would let them reveal exactly who they were before I revealed exactly who I was. The wedding planning process became an exercise in endurance. Patricia insisted on hosting the planning meetings at the Worthington family estate, a sprawling colonial mansion that had been in their family for over a century. Each meeting felt like a carefully orchestrated reminder of my supposed inferior status. "Now, Georgia," Patricia would say, settling into her antique wingback chair in the formal living room, "I know finances are tight for you, so William and I have decided to contribute more substantially to ensure this wedding reflects properly on both our families." I would sit quietly in my Target blouse and department store slacks, listening to Patricia essentially take over every decision. When I suggested a beautiful but affordable florist Emily had mentioned, loving Patricia dismissed the idea immediately. "Oh, my dear, we simply can't have our friends thinking we're being economical with something as important as Marcus's wedding. I've already contacted Westfield Florals. They handle all the important social events in our circle." The venue discussion followed the same pattern. Emily had fallen in love with a charming historic inn about 20 minutes outside the city. It was elegant, but reasonably priced, with beautiful gardens and a romantic atmosphere. Patricia nearly choked on her afternoon tea when Emily showed her the photographs. "Absolutely not," Patricia declared. "The Rivermont Country Club has been hosting Worthington family celebrations for 30 years. I won't have people wondering what's wrong with this family that we couldn't secure our usual venue." What Patricia didn't realize was that I was quietly covering the difference in costs myself. When the florist bill jumped from $3,000 to $12,000, I paid it through a discreet arrangement with my attorney. When the venue costs tripled, I handled that too, but I made sure Patricia received all the credit for the upgrades. Marcus seemed uncomfortable with his mother's behavior, but his attempts to defend me were weak at best. "Mother, please don't worry about George's finances," he would say, gently, which somehow managed to be both supportive and condescending simultaneously. Diana's contributions to these planning sessions were consistently cruel. She would arrive late, usually carrying shopping bags from expensive boutiques, making comments about updating wardrobes and proper presentation while looking pointedly at my clothing. During one particularly painful meeting, the wedding planner asked for my input on the menu selection. Before I could respond, Patricia jumped in with, "Oh, I think Georgia might not be familiar with these types of cuisine options. Perhaps we should keep things simple for everyone's comfort level." The planner, clearly sensing the tension, tried to include me by asking about Emily's favorite foods from childhood. Before I could share any meaningful memories, Diana interrupted with a laugh. "I'm sure whatever Emily grew up eating was fine for then, but this wedding needs to meet certain standards. Our guests will expect a particular level of sophistication." I watched Emily's face during these exchanges, seeing her joy slowly dim as she realized the battle lines being drawn between her two families. She began making comments about maybe having a smaller, simpler wedding. She suggested postponing to save money, unaware that money was never actually the issue. The dress shopping expedition nearly broke my resolve. Patricia, Diana, Emily, and I spent an afternoon at an exclusive bridal salon where Patricia had made appointments. When the consultant asked about my dress as mother of the bride, Patricia immediately jumped in. "Oh, we'll need to find something appropriate for George's budget. Maybe something in a nice navy blue, very practical." Diana added her own helpful suggestion. "There's a lovely little consignment shop downtown that specializes in formal wear for mature women. Very reasonably priced." I maintained my composure, but I was memorizing every slight, every dismissive comment, every moment they chose cruelty over kindness. Emily, trying to keep peace, suggested we all find dresses separately to avoid any complications. That evening, I called my attorney and asked him to prepare some documents for a surprise I was planning. I also asked him to discreetly arrange for a few additional services for the wedding day. If Patricia wanted everything to be perfect and impressive, I was going to help her achieve that goal in ways she couldn't imagine. The morning of Emily's wedding arrived crisp and clear, perfect autumn weather, with golden sunlight streaming through the bridal suite windows at the Rivermont Country Club. I arrived early to help Emily prepare, carrying my simple garment bag containing a dress I had purchased specifically for this day. Patricia burst through the door 30 minutes later, followed by Diana and 3 other Worthington women, all carrying multiple bags and talking loudly about hair appointments and makeup schedules. She took one look at me in my robe and slippers and immediately launched into organization mode. "Georgia, dear, we need to get you sorted first, so you're out of the way when the important preparations begin," Patricia announced. "I brought something for you." She produced a small jewelry box from her oversized handbag and presented it to me with great ceremony. Inside was an absolutely hideous necklace, clearly costume jewelry, trying desperately to look expensive. The fake pearls were yellowing and the clasp looked like it might break if handled too roughly. "I thought this might help brighten up your outfit today," Patricia said with false sweetness. "I know you probably haven't had the opportunity to invest in proper jewelry, and I wanted to make sure you looked appropriate for the photographs." Diana giggled and added, "It belonged to our great-aunt Millicent. She had very practical taste in accessories." Emily looked mortified. "Mom, Patricia, that's really not necessary." "Nonsense," Patricia continued. "I insist. After all, we want Georgia to feel included in all the family photographs." I accepted the necklace graciously, thanking Patricia for her thoughtfulness. What they couldn't see was my amusement at their continued efforts to establish their superiority. I excused myself to the adjoining room to change into my dress. When I emerged wearing a simple but elegant navy dress, Patricia looked me up and down with barely concealed disapproval. "Well, it's certainly serviceable," she said. "Very practical choice." The morning continued with more subtle jabs disguised as helpfulness. When the photographer arrived to begin getting ready, shots, Patricia immediately began directing which photos should be taken and who should be included. "Let's start with just the bridal party," she instructed. "We can add family members gradually." When it came time for mother-daughter photos, Patricia stood nearby, offering suggestions about angles and lighting, clearly implying that I was somehow inadequate for such an important moment. When the photographer suggested some 3-generation photos with Emily, me, and Patricia, she demurred. "Perhaps later," Patricia said dismissively. "We should focus on the important family combinations first." I overheard her speaking to her sister Margaret near the window. "It's such a shame Emily's background is so limited, but she's such a sweet girl and Marcus is determined to lift her up from all this." Margaret responded with equally cruel observations about my obvious struggles and how fortunate Emily was to escape such circumstances. The hair and makeup artists arrived next, and once again Patricia took charge. "Georgia, dear, perhaps you'd like some professional help today. I've arranged for someone to assist you. We all want to look our best." The implication was clear. I needed help looking presentable, while the Worthington women naturally possessed the sophistication to handle their own appearance. Diana chimed in with additional suggestions about age-appropriate makeup and working with challenging features. By the time we were ready to head to the ceremony location, I had endured 4 hours of constant condescension, disguised as generosity. Emily was visibly stressed, torn between defending me and maintaining peace with her future family. As we prepared to leave for the ceremony, I quietly stepped aside and made a phone call to my attorney. "Is everything ready for this afternoon?" I asked. "Yes, Mrs. Patterson," he replied. "All the arrangements are in place." "Are you sure you want to proceed with this plan?" I looked over at Patricia, who was critiquing Emily's lipstick color and suggesting something more sophisticated, while Diana took selfies in the background and made my final decision. "Absolutely," I said. "It's time they learned exactly who they've been underestimating." The wedding ceremony was beautiful, held in the country club's garden pavilion overlooking the lake. Emily looked radiant in her flowing white gown, and Marcus cleaned up well in his black tuxedo. Despite the family tensions, their love for each other shone through every moment of the service. However, even during this sacred ceremony, I found myself relegated to the margins by Patricia's careful orchestration. The seating arrangements had been designed to emphasize the Worthington family's prominence, with their relatives filling the first several rows on the groom's side, while I sat alone in the third row with a few of Emily's teacher friends. During the processional, Patricia made sure to catch the photographer's attention, posing dramatically as Marcus's mother, while barely acknowledging my presence as Emily's only parent, walking her down the aisle. When the minister asked who gives this bride away, I spoke the traditional words, but Patricia's satisfied smile suggested she viewed this as mere formality. The ceremony concluded with enthusiastic applause, and the cocktail hour began immediately on the club's terrace. This was where Patricia's social engineering became most apparent. She had strategically arranged the guest list and mingling areas to ensure that her social circle remained separate from what she perceived as my more modest connections. I found myself standing with Emily's teaching colleagues, lovely people who treated me with genuine warmth and respect. Meanwhile, Patricia held court near the bar, surrounded by the Worthington family friends, speaking loudly enough for me to overhear her commentary. "You know how challenging these mixed marriages can be," she was saying to Mrs. Aldrich from their country club. "Different backgrounds, different expectations. We're doing our best to help Emily transition into our social level." Mrs. Aldrich nodded sympathetically. "It must be so difficult for that poor woman watching her daughter marry so far above her station. You're being remarkably gracious about the whole situation." Diana was working the crowd as well, making comments about the charming simplicity of my side of the family and how refreshing it was to see people who didn't put on airs about their circumstances. Marcus mingled between both groups, clearly trying to bridge the social divide his family had created. When he approached me during cocktails, his discomfort was obvious. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you so much for raising such an incredible daughter," he said genuinely. "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for Emily." Before I could respond, William Worthington appeared at Marcus's elbow, placing a proprietary hand on his son's shoulder. "Marcus, there are some people from the bank I'd like you to meet. Important connections for your future." The message was clear: my conversation with Marcus was less important than his networking with the right social contacts. When dinner was announced, I discovered that the seating arrangements continued Patricia's systematic marginalization. The head table included the wedding party, but I had been placed at a table near the back of the room with Emily's work friends and a few distant relatives I barely knew. Patricia, of course, was seated at the family table, immediately adjacent to the head table, perfectly positioned to insert herself into wedding party conversations and photograph opportunities. During dinner, she frequently stood to take photos with the bride and groom, while I remained at my distant table, watching from afar. The toasts began after the main course, and this was where the family dynamics reached their peak of absurdity. William stood first, speaking eloquently about the Worthington family traditions and how proud they were to welcome Emily into their distinguished lineage. He made several comments about Emily's good fortune in joining such an established family. Patricia followed with her own toast, which was masterfully constructed to sound generous while delivering subtle insults. "Emily, dear, you have brought such authenticity to our family. It's wonderful to see someone who appreciates the finer things in life after growing up with such different experiences. Marcus is clearly committed to ensuring you never want for anything again." The implication was unmistakable. Emily had been rescued from poverty by Marcus's generosity, and the Worthington family deserved credit for their charitable acceptance of someone beneath their social station. Diana's toast was shorter but equally pointed. To Emily, who proves that love truly can overcome any obstacle, including challenging family circumstances. We're so happy Marcus found someone with such a good heart, regardless of background. I sat quietly through these thinly veiled insults, maintaining my composure while mentally preparing for what was about to happen. Emily looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized the pattern in these toasts, while Marcus seemed oblivious to the subtle cruelty his family was displaying. When the toasts concluded, Patricia announced a special presentation to Emily. She had prepared a gift that was clearly designed to emphasize her family's financial superiority, a diamond tennis bracelet that she presented with great fanfare. "This belonged to Marcus's great-grandmother," Patricia announced loudly enough for the entire reception to hear. "It's been in the Worthington family for 4 generations, and we're so pleased to pass it on to someone who will treasure it appropriately." The crowd murmured appreciatively at this display of generosity, while I recognized it for what it was, a public demonstration that the Worthington family provided the valuable gifts, while Emily's own family contributed nothing of significance. That's when I decided it was time for my own surprise presentation. I stood up from my table, slowly straightening my simple navy dress and walking calmly toward the front of the reception hall. The room gradually quieted as guests realized something unexpected was happening. Patricia looked confused and slightly annoyed that someone was interrupting her carefully orchestrated program. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the microphone that had been used for toasts. "I hope you don't mind, but I have an announcement that I think might surprise some of you." Emily looked worried, clearly afraid that I was about to create some kind of scene in response to the evening's treatment. Marcus appeared equally concerned, probably wondering if his new mother-in-law was about to publicly confront his family's behavior. Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to alarm as she realized she had lost control of her perfectly managed event. Diana stopped mid-conversation with her friends, turning to stare at me with undisguised curiosity. "For those of you who don't know me well," I continued, my voice calm and clear, "my name is Georgia Patterson, and I'm Emily's mother. Over the past year, during the wedding planning process, I've heard a lot of discussion about family backgrounds, financial circumstances, and social standings. I think it's time to clear up some misconceptions." The room was completely silent now, every guest focused on what I was about to reveal. I could see Patricia's face growing pale as she began to suspect that her assumptions about my circumstances might have been incorrect. 2 years ago, when my husband Robert passed away from cancer, he left behind quite a substantial estate. I chose not to discuss the details during Emily's engagement because I wanted to observe how both our families would treat each other when they thought money was an issue. I paused, letting this information sink in before continuing with the specifics that would change everything. Robert's estate includes a $12 million penthouse in Manhattan, a $15 million estate in the Hamptons, and an $8 million vineyard in Sonoma County, California, plus various commercial properties throughout the Northeast. The total estate value is approximately $50 million, which Emily will inherit upon my death. The silence that followed was deafening. I could actually hear Patricia's sharp intake of breath from 15 feet away. William's face had gone completely white, while Diana looked like she was calculating how dramatically she had misjudged the situation. "I chose to keep this information private," I continued, "because I wanted to see what kind of character my daughter was marrying into. I wanted to know how this family would treat someone they perceived as having less money than they did." Marcus looked absolutely mortified, clearly realizing for the first time how his family had been behaving toward me all year. Emily's expression was a mixture of shock at learning about her inheritance and embarrassment at her in-laws' revealed prejudices. "I have to say," I continued, looking directly at Patricia, The past year has been quite educational. I've learned exactly how this family treats people they consider beneath their social station. I've watched them display their superiority complex week after week, making assumptions about my worth based on my appearance and employment. The wedding guests were hanging on every word, many of them clearly remembering comments they had heard Patricia and Diana make throughout the evening about my modest circumstances. What disappointed me most, I said, my voice growing stronger, was not the snobbery itself, but the complete lack of kindness toward someone they thought was struggling financially. Instead of compassion or simple human decency, I was treated like a charity case who should be grateful for their tolerance. Patricia opened her mouth as if to speak, but I wasn't finished yet. So now you know the truth about my financial situation. The question is, what does this evening's behavior tell us about your true character? Because wealth without kindness is just expensive cruelty, and I've seen quite enough of that tonight. I handed the microphone back to the reception coordinator and returned to my seat, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. The revelation had changed everything, and everyone present knew it. The immediate aftermath of my announcement was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Patricia, who had spent the entire evening radiating confident superiority, suddenly looked like she had been struck by lightning. Her carefully composed expression crumbled as the implications of her year-long behavior hit her full force. Within minutes, she was at my table, practically falling over herself to apologize. "Georgia, I had no idea. If I had known, please understand I never meant." She couldn't even complete coherent sentences, her social confidence utterly destroyed by the realization that she had been treating someone worth $50 million like a pauper. William appeared moments later, his business mind clearly working overtime to assess this dramatic shift in family dynamics. Suddenly, he was remembering several investment opportunities that might interest me, projects his bank was developing that could benefit from additional funding. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, using a respectful tone I had never heard from him before. "I hope you'll forgive any misunderstandings. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting next week to discuss some mutually beneficial business ventures." Diana's transformation was the most dramatic of all. The woman who had spent months making snide comments about my thrift store clothing suddenly wanted to be my best friend. She appeared at my side within minutes, gushing about how much she had always admired my understated elegance and authentic lifestyle choices. "I've always thought you had such natural grace," Diana said, her voice dripping with newfound admiration. "I was just telling someone earlier how refreshing it is to meet someone who doesn't need to flaunt their wealth." The wedding guests' behavior shifted just as dramatically. People who had barely acknowledged me during cocktails were suddenly appearing at my table, introducing themselves with elaborate courtesy and expressing their pleasure at meeting Emily's distinguished mother. Mrs. Aldrich, who had been discussing my poor circumstances with Patricia earlier, now approached with effusive compliments about my dignified discretion and admirable humility. The same people who had whispered about my modest appearance were now praising my elegant simplicity and refined taste. But the most important reaction came from Marcus himself. He found me during the chaos, his face showing genuine shame and remorse for his family's behavior. "Mrs. Patterson," he said quietly, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life. What my family did tonight, what they've been doing all year, there's no excuse for it. I should have stood up to them from the beginning." For the first time since I had met him, Marcus seemed like a man with genuine character, someone who could acknowledge wrongdoing and take responsibility for allowing it to continue. Emily appeared beside him, tears in her eyes. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about any of this?" "Because I needed to know what kind of family you were marrying into," I replied honestly. "I needed to see how they would treat someone they thought had less than they did. And unfortunately, I got my answer." The photographer who had been dismissive of including me in family photos earlier suddenly wanted to take pictures of everyone with the distinguished Mrs. Patterson. The wedding coordinator approached to ask if there were any special arrangements I needed for the remainder of the evening. Even the wait staff, who had clearly been briefed on the supposed family hierarchy, began treating me with the deference usually reserved for the hosts of the event. It was a perfect example of how quickly people's attitudes change when they discover someone's true financial status. But what pleased me most was watching Emily and Marcus have a serious conversation about family expectations and mutual respect. Marcus was clearly horrified by his family's behavior, and Emily was finally understanding the dynamics that had been making her uncomfortable throughout the engagement period. From now on, Marcus said loud enough for his parents to hear, "My wife's mother will be treated with the respect she deserves, regardless of anyone's assumptions about anything. If that's a problem for anyone in my family, they can explain it to me personally." Patricia and William quickly assured him that there would never be any problems going forward, that they had simply misunderstood the situation, and that they looked forward to developing a closer relationship with me. The evening concluded with a very different energy than it had begun. The Worthington family's social superiority had been completely dismantled, and new boundaries had been established based on mutual respect, rather than assumed financial hierarchies. As the reception wound down, I felt a satisfaction deeper than money could provide. I had protected Emily's happiness while teaching an important lesson about character kindness and the danger of making assumptions about people's worth based on their appearance or lifestyle choices. 6 months after Emily's wedding, I often reflect on how that dramatic evening changed our family dynamics permanently. The lesson everyone learned that day extended far beyond the immediate shock of my financial revelation. Patricia has made genuine efforts to repair our relationship, though the process has been slow and sometimes awkward. She now calls before making wedding-related decisions and actually listens to my opinions about family gatherings. Her attempts at conversation are stilted but sincere, and I can see her struggling to overcome years of ingrained social prejudices. Our relationship will never be warm and close, but it has evolved into something based on mutual respect rather than her perceived superiority. She occasionally makes comments about investment strategies and estate planning, clearly fishing for financial advice, but she has learned to treat me as an equal rather than a charity case. William has approached me several times about business opportunities, which I have politely declined. Our interactions are cordial but formal, both of us understanding that his newfound interest in my company stems entirely from my revealed wealth, rather than any genuine appreciation for my personality. Diana's transformation has been the most transparent of all. She now brings me expensive gifts for every family occasion and constantly compliments my clothing choices, the same outfits she previously criticized. Her sudden admiration is obviously motivated by financial considerations, but at least she has learned to keep her cruel observations to herself. The most meaningful change has been in Marcus himself. The wedding revelation served as a wake-up call about his family's character and his own responsibility to protect Emily from their prejudices. He has become much more assertive about standing up to his parents when they make inappropriate comments about anyone's background or circumstances. Emily and Marcus's marriage has actually grown stronger as a result of working through this crisis together. They have developed clearer boundaries with both sets of family members and have learned to prioritize their own values over external social pressures. Emily has also gained a new understanding of her inheritance responsibilities. We have had long conversations about using wealth wisely, supporting meaningful causes, and never allowing money to make her feel superior to others. She has started volunteering with literacy programs at local schools and has established a scholarship fund for students from single-parent families. The revelation about Robert's estate has changed my own perspective on grief and moving forward. For 2 years, I had been living quietly, almost hiding from the life Robert had provided for us. Standing up for myself at Emily's wedding helped me realize that honoring his memory meant using his legacy positively, rather than apologetically. I have since become more involved in community organizations and have quietly funded several local initiatives, including a new children's wing at the library where I work and a cancer support program at the hospital where Robert received treatment. These projects have given me a sense of purpose that extends beyond simply managing inherited wealth. The wedding revelation also taught me valuable lessons about testing people's character. While my method was dramatic, it revealed important truths about the Worthington family's values that might have taken years to discover otherwise. Emily learned these lessons early in her marriage rather than after years of subtle mistreatment. Most importantly, that evening demonstrated the difference between earning respect through kindness and demanding deference through wealth. The Worthington family's immediate transformation after learning about my financial status showed how shallow their previous judgments had been. Now, when I attend family gatherings, I watch carefully to see how everyone treats the waitstaff, the service providers, and anyone they perceive as having less money or status. Those observations tell me more about someone's true character than any amount of social conversation. Emily and Marcus are expecting their first child next spring, and I am determined that this grandchild will grow up, understanding that a person's worth has nothing to do with their bank account. We will teach them to show kindness to everyone regardless of circumstances, and to judge character by actions rather than appearances. Looking back on that wedding day, I realized that staying quiet about my wealth was one of the best decisions I ever made. It allowed me to see clearly who deserved my trust and respect, and who was simply performing kindness when they thought it might benefit them, socially or financially. The greatest gift I gave my daughter that day wasn't revealing her inheritance. It was showing her that she never has to accept disrespectful treatment from anyone, regardless of their social status or family connections. She watched me stand up for myself with dignity and grace, and she learned that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply revealing the truth. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them show you who they really are. And now, every family gathering is a reminder that respect isn't about what you have, but how you treat others. Have you ever had to deal with people who judged you based on your appearance or perceived financial status? How did you handle the situation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please give this video a like if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories and share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's assumptions. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that true wealth lies in treating everyone with dignity and kindness, regardless of their circumstances.